There's been seemingly this intense focus on what Black voters are going to do. A lot of articles suggesting that Black voters are going to break with the Democratic Party and are going to vote in large numbers for Donald Trump. Other articles out, the New York Times, Washington Post, other news outlets suggesting that Black voters are very frustrated with the Biden-Harris administration over everything from student loan debt relief to the Biden embrace of Israel in the Israel-Palestinian war. And some big name folks, people with platforms, in the music industry, in media, are out also suggesting that Donald Trump is the way to go in this next election and that Biden has let Democrats down, and particularly Black voters. So I want to talk with Adrianne today because she does a lot of polling, she does a lot of focus groups, and she has her finger on the pulse of Black voters. And I think it's so important that we start talking facts and not, being a part of this machine that continuously pushes out misinformation and disinformation. So thank you so much, Adrianne, for joining me today and for all the work that you do around this issue. It's so critically important. I want to start with this current NBC poll. There's a NBC poll, November 19th, November 20th, that says Biden still holds an advantage over Trump among Black voters. This poll has him up 69% to 20%. But in this same article, talks about all of the frustration that Black voters have with Biden on everything, as I said, from student loan debt to his position on this war in the Middle East. So tell us what you make of this NBC poll, and then how we should read it in light of that poll that came out earlier in the month from the New York Times, I think that shocked everyone, suggesting that 22% of Black voters might be voting for Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, I think that the way that we should look at this, and particularly, and I'll start with our 22% of Black voters going to support Donald Trump. Let's start there, because I think there's some other legitimate issues to talk about. And the answer to that for all of us is we should just look at what Black voters have done already in relationship to supporting Donald Trump. And the fact of the matter is that Black voters have not supported Donald Trump or Republicans even that Trump has endorsed anywhere near those levels, even though, before 2020, there were pundits and there were polls that suggested that Black voters were going to support Donald Trump at these new historic levels. And that simply did not pan out. Donald Trump was not on the ballot in 2018, and yet Black voters turned out to flip the House in Congress because of a recognition of what it would mean for Donald Trump to maintain control of the House of Representatives. So Black voters have done what they needed to do to both preserve our democracy, but also to preserve the potential for us to have a future as a community. So when it comes to Donald Trump and his policies and his ideas and his outrageous rhetoric. So we have to start there. That has not happened. There's no real indication that those numbers will come to be. And some of it, when we think about the polls, when they do polling, they're not just polling Black folks, right? They have a small sample size, usually, of Black voters, from which they then extrapolate, the behavior of all Black voters. So the sample size is small to begin with. Secondly, I just think that there's outliers in the sample size, and what seems to be happening to me is that the outliers within the small sample, we're taking that and we're saying, okay, so this is how all Black voters are going to act. And that small sample plus outliers just doesn't tell us anything. I think that there really is some legitimate concerns that Democrats should be tracking, which is that, like all other voters in the country, when you ask Black voters how they feel about the direction of the country, people are very pessimistic. And they're pessimistic for a whole host of reasons. And so we need to address those reasons. There's many ways in which there's kind of information barriers to Black voters. People are not hearing what the Biden administration has done. They're not getting the information. It's not not breaking through in the places where they're getting their news and getting their information. So a lot of people just feel like they haven't seen a lot happen. And that's an important place for Democrats to start, in making sure that voters understand what the administration has done and how it's actually impacted the lives of Black people and of Black communities. And there's a lot there, I think, that we simply that just gets overlooked, including the stuff around checks, right? And who gave what checks to who and how much. I think people just confuse a lot of that, and I think the media sometimes is complicit in that confusion.
Yeah, and that's the question I was going to ask you. Like, who's driving this narrative? Because if you Google, I just Googled Black voters 2024. First article comes up, says, eyes on 2024, Black voters sour on Biden. The next one says, Biden might be Democrats' biggest problem, convincing Black and Latino voters not to support Trump. Another article, are Black voters looking for an alternative in 2024? The warning signs for Democrats about Black voters in 2020. I mean, the list just, and these aren't like fringe papers. This is Politico. This is MSNBC. This is NBC. These are what you would say are left-leaning publications, and they are leading some Black men lose faith in Biden. I mean, it just goes on.
There is this
on and on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so the media has this bizarre kind of voyeurism, right? That is like they're sort of breathlessly waiting for Trump to flip the Blacks, right? Like that seems to be the thing that they are very, very excited about, right? I mean, I've been saying like it's sort of, like political pornography or something. It's like when, like let's all tune in and see how Donald Trump is going to get the Blacks, right? And so there's this weird sort of very odd giddiness about this that the media has sort of fixated on and picked up on. And so it's partly being driven, obviously, by the media, and I think polls that are not helpful across the board. I also think that this is a narrative, obviously, that helps Republicans, because it is a narrative that says to Black voters, one, that all the things that you think you've heard about Joe Biden are true, regardless of where you've heard them from, right? And it also says you can have an off-ramp, right? That there are off-ramps for you and you should take them, right? And so that narrative, obviously, without the sort of, giving the same kind of attention to the impact of the Biden-Harris administration's policies on Black communities, right? Instead of doing some stories on that and talking about why Black voters still continue to support Joe Biden in all of their polls in higher numbers than any other constituency. Why is that? Let's talk about why that is, right? And it's because there are policies that, two things I say, policies that actually have had positive impact and positive benefit in Black communities. And secondly, I think Black voters are really clear about what the stakes are in this next election and have been for a long time. People understand what it meant to live in the United States of America under a Donald Trump administration. Black people understand that. And so I just
want to say this, Adrianne, about that point, because there's an article in the New York Times that says Americans, they're not talking just about Black folks, but they're saying, this article says Americans seem to have amnesia about what it was like to live under a Donald Trump administration. And you have people now saying, we wish he was back in office, that things were better. He was, a chaos master, and he said things that we didn't necessarily like, and he was rude, blah, blah, blah. But they're fantasizing about this period that didn't exist and heaping on him this level of success that he's undeserving of. Mm-hmm. But and the article basically says the most popular president is the former president, right?